Okay, here you go, Bill.
I just got to kick on the, got it. Okay, some weeks ago, I was asked by Sangapurna whether I'd be interested in presenting the reasons why I'm a Buddhist. And I was going to thank him tonight, but I can't. I believe he's unwell, so that's no good. This is a privilege and it's an opportunity for reflection for me. Am I coming across loud and clear?
Yes, you are.
Yes, good. Now, I'm not 100% certain of what constitutes a Buddhist and whether I am one. I do consider myself as a follower of Buddha and his teachings, and I enjoy the company of like-minded people. Some of my time I live according to the 5 precepts and the 8-fold path, and other times less so. But at least I have an awareness of this gap when I'm not a Buddhist. At 10 years of age, I read on the side of a food container that, quote, "man was born to die," unquote, obviously referring to humans generally. It was a health-related notice, but I could only recall this one stark fact. I felt that this just wasn't fair. Sometime later, I found out that our sun star would eventually explode and engulf our planet Earth. I thought that this was also unfair and really serious, though I was mainly concerned with what the extra heat would do to my vinyl recordings. I hadn't come across the idea of impermanence and the truth of constant change yet. I saw my first image of the Buddha when I was 12 in a magazine, a picture of a gigantic public statue in the meditating posture in Japan. This left me with an indelible impression. At 16, I read 7 Years in Tibet, the account of 2 prisoners of war escapees from the British in India during the Second World War, who struggled their way across the Himalayas into Tibet and lived there for several years, and who became closely acquainted with the young Dalai Lama. The descriptions of the Buddhist monks and the monasteries provided a glimpse of a wonderful people with mysterious practices. Other related recordings of the time were the adventures of Lobsang Rampa, a fictitious Tibetan mystic. The stories were less about Buddhism than supernatural experiences such as astral travel, but they were totally spellbinding. Now, I apologise if some of these names might be a little bit before some of the younger people here, but some of the older people may be familiar with them. Other related readings at the time were the adventures, at 17, I beg your pardon, at 17 I seriously hurt my lower back in the workplace and spent several decades searching for ways to lessen the pain and cure the problem. One of the therapeutic measures I took was to take up hatha yoga, which I found out wasn't actually all that therapeutic. It was more something that more preventative than therapeutic. So that led me into a general interest in Hinduism, which led me eventually into a study of the majesty of Buddhism. I still exercise now, and the back problem is under control, mostly. At 20, I became interested and experimented with mind-expanding psychedelic drugs, LSD, mescaline, and magic mushrooms. Incredibly otherworldly for me, such visions and altered perceptions of space and time are indescribable. I had a glimpse of realities beyond my day-to-day consciousness, and my imaginations of the vastness of the human mind were ignited. Shortly after that, I discovered the TV adventures of the Tibetan monkey king and later Grasshopper, the Shaolin monk in the Kung Fu series. These stories fired my interest in things esoterically Eastern, particularly Buddhism and its magical wisdom-like qualities. For some time, I took part in a Hindu-inspired group called Anandamaga in Melbourne. I also followed Yogananda and Krishnamurti books. Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance much later was of great interest to me, and I also read The Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac. After practicing with two Zen Buddhist groups in Melbourne, I came across other people in my life who followed and practiced Buddhism. In my early 20s, I read the Sutra of Huineng and the Diamond Sutra and was enthralled by the deep understandings portrayed. The Zen battles between the masters and the Zen koans totally inspired me. At 25, I travelled briefly to Japan and was able to spend a short time in a Zen monastery. Not for long though, it was winter and they were in the middle of an intense session, much too harsh for such a weak Westerner as me at the time. I left there with an injured knee due to forcing my body into a half lotus position for lengthy periods, but with an awareness that I could overcome pain by focusing my mind. I continued my travels, partly by Dharma Bum style and a freight train in the US. I spent time with a spiritual group in San Francisco, which I later found out to be a Korean cult called Moonies. As difficult to leave this group was, because of its emotional entrapment process, I managed to extricate myself, but with a headache that lasted a week. But this is another story. Back in Oz, I endured a couple of potentially life-threatening medical challenges. I reached the point where I accepted my mortality and felt, quote, so be it if this is the time. However, excellent medical procedures helped keep me alive. In 1995, I discovered the Melbourne Buddhist Centre in East Brunswick, which was by good fortune not far from where I lived. This was a major selling point as I liked local activities. Since then, I have met countless helpful, kind, generous and friendly individuals at the centre. I have enjoyed participating in weekend retreats, study groups and other events held by the centre over time. I have always been inspired and enthused by them. On one occasion, I was able to share morning meditation, breakfast and conversation with Sangharakshita, Sri Ratna's founder, on his one and only visit to the Antipodes, as far as I know. I now value the MBC, or Melbourne Buddhist Centre, as a place where meaning is paramount and friendships flourish. Just over 10 years ago, I travelled with the Tai Chi group to China and later continued on to Tibet, where I was able to get an idea of what was still culturally alive. It was a brief moment where place and people I had read about became alive in my life. Dharma study. In this open forum, it is wonderful to know that there is no expectation or obligation to take on doctrinal proclamations, and that the objective of study is more about understanding logically, reflecting upon, then applying to life and accepting as a livable truth if appropriate. As the Buddha is reputed to have said in so many words, do not believe any pronouncement from any authority and realise that true understanding can only arise through one's own efforts. I do like Monty Python's take on the infinitesimally unlikelihood of our birth as a pronouncement. Buddhism for me, in terms of Western science and the physical universe, the notion of infinite space or of endless time have always fascinated me. I find it difficult to accept the idea of a point in time, a point when time began, and I reflect on this as a concept that cannot be understood logically. This is a symbol for me that really is beyond concepts and words, and is an analogy of the ultimate inexpressible truth that Buddhism points to. Regarding my initial attraction to Buddhism, the attainment of wisdom was the shining jewel for me. Faith or compassion were then not major considerations. I still feel that wisdom beats whatever comes second, whether it's opposite or as a balance. The three root poisons of greed, hatred, and ignorance seem to be the bare bones of the causes of suffering in life. I love the three opposites: generosity, compassion, and wisdom. I also appreciate the concept of equanimity that Buddhism has introduced to me, with its perfect antidote to the human habit of grasping at the desirable and rejecting the undesirable. Generosity is less painful for me now, but rightly or wrongly, I still feel it needs to be tempered by wisdom. Having reverence to noble ways of thinking and behaving can help me in my choices and decisions, though not always. I strive for this, but it doesn't always happen. On karma or conditioned codependence, Buddhism has provided me with a better understanding of the effect of the intention of an act, word, or thought with regard to consequences, and how intention can create a mindset that will attract positive or negative outcomes. I have little idea how this process works, but I have experienced the evidence that it does. On patience and tolerance, I still lose it occasionally, though just for microseconds before realizing this. And then I sometimes just find myself laughing. Regarding meditation practices, mindfulness of breathing is so natural and easily accessible and is always readily available. I like the idea that mindfulness can affect the lifespan of things and that care can prevent destruction prematurely. Metta-bhavana has typically been partly a challenging practice for me. Finding a neutral person that I have no feeling about one way or the other is the most problematic. I always have some sort of a feeling about someone. With regard to my experience with really difficult people, such as many of the youth justice clients that I've worked with, the effects have been quite profound, effective. I value the 6-element practice because it breaks down physical and non-physical existence in a relatively simple way and seems to suggest how the bodily and mind mental elements relate to the physical and non-physical environment. Just sitting is a powerful way to watch the creation and dissipation of thought as long as I focus. Pujas, sometimes long-winded and seemingly never-ending, but profoundly deep and always ending with serenity. The Dhammapada is the most user-friendly text in Buddhism for me, as was the Christian book of Proverbs when I was looking at what wisdoms this system was offering. Currently, I have many possessions, though at one stage in my adult life, I could put all my possessions in one small room. I have generally less attachment to what I have accumulated compared to my one-room collection. Thank goodness. How Buddhism affects my experience of music. There is an immediacy of music that can't be ignored, whether being physically played or listened to. I have a fonder approach to music through Buddhism with a feeling for its fleeting and ungraspable or ephemeral nature. It is really a here and now experience, especially enhanced by performing musicians who work as a connected unit. To summarize, I arrived at Buddhism via several indirect roads. I love the wisdom aspect, the idea of equanimity, the mediation, the meditation practices, the notion of conditioned co-production, Dharma study, and the truth of impermanence, the perception of the flowing stream of music, my understanding that words and concepts are incredibly useful, but not absolute truths in themselves. And finally, the people that I had met who are traveling this road. To conclude, Buddhism for me has the most logical responses to questions on the nature of existence and reality that I have ever come across, and it advises that I investigate thoroughly with faith and scrutiny before believing. Buddhism provides me with inspiration and very occasionally helps fan the embers of the desire for the seemingly impossible dream of ultimate freedom. There are many more reasons, such as kindness, ethics, and compassion, but no room in this account.